The dryers at Neon Silk never stopped humming. Even at 2 in the morning, when the front door was locked and the open sign had gone dark, the machines kept their slow, steady churn. Warm air, white noise, the illusion of cleanliness. Hale used to think the sound was comforting. Now he thought it was a lullaby for people who didn't want to remember. He stood behind the battered metal counter in the laundromat, running a rag over the same patch of laminate he already cleaned twice. The place smelled faintly of detergent and hot metal, with a sharp edge of peppermint that didn't belong to any soap on the shelves. Virgil's peppermint. A woman in a navy peacoat folded towels at the nearest table. She'd been there since midnight, feeding quarters into a washer she never turned on, folding and unfolding the same stack as if repetition could make her hands forget what her mind wouldn't. People thought Neon Silk was a quack hypnotherapy joint, or a spa for overworked execs scrubbing regrets. They were half right. The other half stayed behind the velvet curtain at the back, where the lights were brighter and the air tasted cleaner in a way that didn't make sense. In Monroe Bay, everyone knew places like this existed. You didn't have to believe in ghosts to believe in the weight of the town. You only had to live here long enough to feel it collecting behind your eyes, in your throat, in the soft place beneath your ribs where breath turned shallow. Neon Silk was one of the few places that offered relief. Hale heard the bell above the front door jingle once, someone rattling it from the outside. Habit more than hope, and then silence. The woman at the folding table didn't look up. He glanced at the wall clock. 2:17 a.m. It was going to be one of those nights. Quiet on the surface, busy where it mattered. He let the rag fall to the counter and stepped around the end, slipping past the curtain in the back like he'd done 1,000 times. The back room was long and narrow, lined with shelves that held glass vials in neat rows. Under the fluorescent lights, the vials glinted with color. Thin ribbons of gold, bruised purple swirls, pale blue fog. Memories extracted, purified, and bottled like top-shelf whiskey. At the far end of the room, behind a desk that looked like it had survived 3 floods and a fire, Virgil sat with his hands folded, fingerless gloves dark against his skin. His locks were pulled back, the ends tied neatly. His eyes flicked up as Hale approached. "Is she ready?" Virgil asked. "I think so." Hale pulled the intake clipboard from the desk corner and scanned the list. 2 scheduled walk-ins, 1 emergency cleansing, penciled in with Virgil's tight handwriting. He stopped asking what qualified as emergency here. In Monroe Bay, everything did. "You want me to prep the chair?" he asked. Virgil nodded. "And the jars." Hale moved to the cabinet beneath the shelves and unlocked it. Inside were empty jars in different sizes. He lifted one and set it on the table beside the reclining chair. There was a process to this. There were rules. Hale liked rules. Rules made the work feel less like magic and more like maintenance. You didn't open a jar once it was sealed. You didn't label a jar with emotion. Only facts: name, date, category. You didn't joke about what was inside, and you never took a memory without consent. That last rule was what made Neon Silk different from the stories people whispered about other places. The backroom men, the alley bargains, the things that took and took until a person was all smooth edges and blank stares. Virgil didn't do that. Instead, he offered a much-needed service. The velvet curtain moved, and the woman from the folding table appeared, pea coat buttoned all the way up despite the warmth. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her expression tight with the kind of composure that came from running out of choices. Virgil stood, gesturing toward the chair with a practiced gentleness. "Are you ready, Ms. Larkin?" She sat without hesitation. Hale watched her hands grip the armrests until her knuckles went pale. "What do you want removed?" Virgil asked, voice even. Ms. Larkin swallowed. "The night on Ferry Street." Hale's stomach tightened. He'd heard that phrase before. Everyone had. Ferry Street held too much history. Virgil didn't react. "Specific memory?" "All of it," she said, and the words came out cracked. "The screaming, the smell, the—" She squeezed her eyes shut. "I can't sleep. I can't. I see it every time I close my eyes." Virgil nodded once. "You understand what this means?" "Yes," she whispered. "I understand." Hale held out the consent form. She signed with a shaking hand. Virgil placed his gloved fingertips lightly at Ms. Larkin's temple and spoke in a low murmur Hale couldn't quite catch, something between instruction and prayer. Ms. Larkin's breathing slowed. Hale took the jar and held it under the small spout on the extraction device. The machine was older than it looked, all brass fittings and polished tubing. He learned not to question how it worked. It just did. A thin ribbon of something, colorless at first, threaded down into the jar. Then it darkened, swirling into a smoky gray shot through with small flashes of light, like distant street lamps seen through fog. A memory, pulled free and made physical. Ms. Larkin shuddered once, then went slack. Tears slipped from the corners of her closed eyes, but her face softened in a way Hale had learned to recognize. Relief. When the jar was half full, Virgil lifted his hand. The ribbon stopped. Hale sealed the lid, waxing the rim with steady hands. He labeled it Larkin, M. Ferry Street, April 18th, trauma/event. He then set it gently onto the shelf Virgil indicated. Ms. Larkin blinked awake a few minutes later, disoriented. "What did I—" she began, then stopped. Her brow furrowed as if searching for something that wasn't there. "I came for—" "Your laundry," Virgil said. "It's done in the dryer." She nodded and stood slowly. "Yes." She smoothed her coat and left the back room with the kind of careful calm Hale envied. When the curtain fell shut behind her, Hale exhaled. "Did it work?" "It always works," Virgil replied. "For a while." Hale looked at him. "They can come back for it." Virgil's gaze didn't waver. "They can." That was the agreement, the mercy of it, the reassurance that forgetting wasn't a theft, just a pause. And Hale believed in it, most days. He turned back to the shelf and noticed something that made his hands stop mid-motion. A jar, tucked behind a row, was unlabeled on the spine-facing side. That wasn't unusual. Older jars were sometimes stacked too deep and labels faced outward. But this one was positioned wrong, turned inward, hiding its name. He reached for it. The glass was thicker than the others, and the wax seal around the lid was old but intact. He rotated it, and his own handwriting stared back at him. Hale, unrecovered, September 12th, family. No location. No category beyond that. His eyes had moved past the label, scanning the shelf. There were others grouped close together, with their labels turned inward, as if deliberately hidden from casual view. Dates, street names, rooms. Mariner's Row, June 3rd, third floor bathroom. Blackthorn Motel, November 21st, room 8. Carter House, February 14th, basement. What are you doing? Virgil's voice cut through the room. Hale hadn't heard him move. Virgil stood near the desk now, watching him with a stillness that made the air feel heavy. Hale swallowed. What are these? He grabbed the first one. Virgil's expression didn't change, only his eyes hardened by a degree. Put it back. Hale stared at him. Did you... Hale, put it back. When? He asked. When and what memories are they? You asked me to never tell you, Virgil sighed. That is what we do here. It says family. I had a family? Virgil didn't flinch. You came in here and you couldn't stand up straight. You couldn't eat. You couldn't speak without shaking. You were breaking. I gave you what you asked for, like we do for others. Hale's grip slipped for a moment, and he caught the jar tighter. I knew we keep theirs. Clients. People who come in and sign the form and leave lighter. I didn't think... His voice faltered. I didn't think mine would be sitting on a shelf like a bottle of bleach. There are so many of them. You were a client. What did you expect? A silence stretched between them, filled by the distant churn of dryers. I want to know, he said. Are you sure? You could just put it back. Hale swallowed hard. The answer should have been yes. It should have been automatic. Instead, his mouth filled with the taste of something metallic, like pennies left too long on the tongue. He looked down at the wax seal. Or I could open it. Virgil stepped forward. Yes, you can. He peeled the wax seal back, and the lid twisted easier than it should have. The moment the jar opened, the air changed, and a scent he couldn't place hit Hale first. Then came the sound, distant shouting, muffled by walls, the slap of feet on wet concrete. The memory didn't pour out like smoke. It slid into him like a hand into a glove. Hale was standing in a kitchen that wasn't neon silk. A small kitchen with peeling wallpaper and a yellow lamp that flickered when the fridge motor kicked on. He saw a woman facing him with a look of fear on her face. The memory skipped. Red spread across the tile from underneath her body. In his hand, he held a knife. Virgil's voice broke through the memory. You didn't cry. Not then. What's going on? Hale, you don't need to... He reached for the jar labeled Blackthorn Motel. He twisted the lid just enough for the seal to give, and the memory slid back into him without resistance. Fluorescent light buzzing, a door chain rattling once, the feel of cool tile under his shoes as he waited. He remembered checking the time, the small satisfaction of being early. He remembered the quiet and the knife in his hand. He saw the surprise flicker across the face of a stranger, someone he hadn't planned for, who stood across from him. She mouthed for him to stop. He raised the blade and took a step closer. Virgil's voice cut through the memory. Hale, stop. He found himself back in neon silk. He dropped to the floor of the back room, and the now empty jar slipped from his fingers. It didn't shatter. The glass was too thick. He felt Virgil place a hand on his shoulder. I told you. Hale's face was wet. He didn't remember crying until he tasted salt. The grief returned, and it curled around his ribs. Then came the pain. Not the kind that physically hurt. It was emotional, tied with love and sorrow. You shouldn't have kept them, Hale rasped. Virgil's hand didn't leave his shoulder. I keep them all. That's what I do. You know that. Monroe Bay doesn't let wounds heal. It only lets them deepen. If we don't take some of the weight, people drown in it. You archived a killer. I archived you. Virgil placed the 2 jars back on the shelf, exactly where they belonged. That's what you wanted. He wanted to hate Virgil, but he knew he asked for this. He too signed the form like Ms. Larkin did just moments ago. He stood to his feet and knew he didn't need to open another. Everything was clear now. He wiped his face with the heel of his palm, then reached for the clipboard on the desk with fingers that refused to stop shaking. There's one more appointment for tonight, he spoke in a shaky voice. When? At 3. As he passed the shelves, he felt them. Hundreds of jars, each holding a piece of Monroe Bay's weight. He understood now why the lids had to stay sealed. Not because the memories were evil, because the town was too full. He stepped toward the velvet curtain, back into the laundromat where the world pretended stains could be scrubbed out. He glanced back and saw that Virgil was already preparing another empty jar for the next person who couldn't carry what Monroe Bay had done to them. Hale went to the counter. He cleaned the register, and when the bell over the door jingled at 3:01 a.m., he didn't flinch. He lifted his chin, the memory of his mother burning like a brand in his chest, and said, evenly as he could, "Neon Silk, how can we help you forget?"